You're listening to the Mind Your Autistic Brain podcast, the show for late identified autistics. Each week, you will hear the autism journey of another late identified person, including their hardest part, their best part, and insights they share just for you. So you know you are not alone on this journey, my friend. Find your person and community here each week. And don't miss the special editions of Creator Spotlight and Hot Topic with your hostess with the mostest, Social Autie. That's me, Carole Jean. Let's get started. Welcome to Mind Your Autistic Brain, and my guest is my friend Stephanie. And our hot topic conversation today is eating, alexithymia, and autism, and how it plays a role in our lives, and how our sensitivities play a role in this as well. I am so excited to have Stephanie join me today because this is something she and I both have worked through. This is something that we have really discussed, that it has been a part of our life. And that's been some food challenges, and that's been sort of all of the things we're talking about today. So welcome, Stephanie. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
I really have been looking forward to this conversation with you because you and I had a really great conversation a few weeks ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, Stephanie, we really need to share this because we have different experiences, but we have some similar experiences. And so many people have been coming to me and talking and asking about, what they can do when it comes to having some eating challenges, and how that plays a big part in our life. And you and I sort of have uncovered and discovered more about how being autistic, and also I have alexithymia, and how those types of things and sensitivities to tastes, touches, smells, how textures, all of those things play into how we look at food, and also sort of the control element of food and what we can and can't do to try and gain some of that control in our life. So Stephanie, just to start out by sharing your autism story. How did you learn you were autistic, and how did it show up in your world?
So I learned I was autistic about a year ago. That is, a year ago I got diagnosed. But I think it was about 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, that my mom, she called me up and she said, I want to come over. And she came over, and she had been to this lecture about autism and finding purpose, because apparently autistic people are more likely to be looking for purpose than non-autistic people. And in this lecture, this was given by Annelies Speck, a Dutch researcher and psychologist. She had been saying all these things about autism, how it often coexists with depression and anxiety, things like self-harm and eating disorders, and that people have a preference for logic, which I do very badly. Without logic, I'm just completely lost. And a few more things that my mom recognized. My dad has been diagnosed with autism about 5 years ago. So yeah, I guess she connected the dots, and she told me that she thought I was autistic. Yeah.
I love that. It's always so interesting to me to hear everyone's stories and sort of how it happens, how it shows up in your world. And it's so often from someone who's close to us that, either like my friend Jason said, he had a friend that just subtly dropped the breadcrumbs for years. And he's like, man, I don't do subtle. You're just going to have to come out and say it.
Yeah, my mom was very clear. She just came over. Yeah. And I think one thing that I especially remember, like something that became very clear to me when now I have my diagnosis, is that as a kid, I remember I didn't really understand a lot of the things that were going on and a lot of the stories that were going on. And then I would ask these questions in order to get a grip on what was going on, or to understand what they were saying. And then people would say like, oh, that's such a smart question. You're such a smart girl. And I felt so puzzled because I felt like I needed those questions in order to understand what was going on, whereas other people didn't need those questions and they just seemed fine without any questions. So I I often wondered about that, like how is that possible? And I think the weak central coherence theory is really something that for me resonates a lot. I think that's exactly what happened there.
I can't imagine a world where no one asks questions. That is such a foreign concept to me. But I'm like you. I ask questions for clarification so that I can better understand something. Because usually, if there's a whole lot going on or there's a lot of different things happening, I'm trying to put all the parts and pieces together, and there's this huge giant funnel, and all of this information's coming in. So I'm down at the bottom trying to filter it all out to figure out what's important to take in and what I can discard that doesn't apply. So yeah, I always say it's the quality questions that we ask in life that determine where we are going and where we are.
Yeah, and I think also not just the big filter with like picking out the pieces that are important, but also asking for the pieces that are missing, because I think neurotypical people are very, very good at guessing all the missing pieces. But I want to know them, because without those pieces, I just feel like if the pieces are a certain way, the story will be completely different than when those pieces are a different way. And somehow neurotypical people are mysteriously able to just guess which pieces are the right one.
I so agree with you. You are such a wise woman, really are, because I think that's something that we all approach that with. It's like, well, what pieces are missing? And sure, I can hypothesize what that piece might be, but I want your input as to how you're seeing it, because my ability to predict could be really wrong based on what I am perceiving and thinking in my head versus what you're perceiving and thinking in your head. So, I think we end up with all these different scenarios that we're running through our heads, trying to figure out what all these other people just make these, quick projections, and they fill in these pieces that are missing, and they just kind of go with it. And we're just like, oh, wait a minute, hang on. No, we're not. Nobody's going anywhere. Get off the bus. We still have questions.
Yeah.
So Stephanie, let's talk about food.
Mm-hmm.
This is this is a really big part of my world. I know it's a part of your world as well. And how do you approach food? What does food mean to you now? And what are the struggles or challenges that you've had with food in the past?
So I actually now things are really going very well with food. I can really enjoy food now, which is so different from the past. And I can even forget about like sometimes I find myself being hungry and I realize, oh, I forgot to eat, which I also couldn't have imagined as a teenager or in my early 20s. So I think now I have an eating schedule because I had therapy in which I got this eating schedule, and I mostly stick to that, or I try to deviate just a little bit. And when I do that, things are just actually pretty great.
So what was your original struggle that led you to go get an eating plan or a food schedule? What led up to that?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a long story. I was always quite a tall girl, and I was a bit chubbier than the other kids. And then I hit puberty a bit earlier than most other kids. So I always felt like this really big person. And on top of that, there was society, and I guess also my mom, who were, I guess both my mom and society were giving me these messages that being big and being fat is something bad, and eating is something shameful. and losing weight is good, and losing weight makes you happy, and being skinny is the way to go. So from that moment onwards, I think I was about 10 years old when it started. I just wanted to lose weight. And I think from my 10th until my 23rd or so, I've been struggling with food in several ways. I've had an anorexic period for a few years, and I've had more bulimic kind of periods, and I've had periods in which it was quite all right. But I think all those years I was so focused on food all the time that I just missed out on um, such a huge part of my life, because I was just always so focused on what did I eat, what am I going to do to compensate, what am I going to eat next, and what can I skip. Um, and I was just missing all the conversations, and like life was happening in the background, kind of. So,
Oh, yes. You
yeah.
just so spoke to my heart on that. I had the same, very similar struggle, and the awareness when I wasn't thinking about food 24/7, because I'm 5'10". I'm a tall woman. And, I was never a heavy child, but when I hit puberty, well, I started filling out and getting kind of womanly, and curvy, and I was
Mm-hmm.
a little on the chubbier side. And it was, you know, I remember looking at the cover of 17 magazine when Cindy Crawford had her first cover. And I remember looking at her thinking, why don't I look like that? And, I grew up in a society where, you had to be thin. You had to be perfectly coiffed from head to toe. Your hair had to be done, your makeup on, your clothes had to be just right because you have all these social events and you're seen in the, public arena often. And it's one of those things, not just from a societal standpoint, but just from also just the social peer pressure of the people that you're surrounded by. That's what they're talking about. That's what they're thinking about. That's, what the conversations are. So I always felt like I stuck out like, a giant, tall, redheaded sore thumb in the world. And it was really a tough thing. But when I finally found out what worked for me for food, and I had this aha moment, kind of like what you talk about. You felt like you had been missing all the conversations. I went to a cocktail party. And for the first time, I didn't care what was on the buffet table or what was being passed around as appetizers. I didn't think anything about the food the whole time. I focused on the people and the conversation. And I remember getting home that night and going, oh my gosh, I think this is the first time I've ever had fun at a cocktail party. And I actually had great conversations because I realized the rest of the time I would have been thinking about the food. I would have been making sure I tried everything, or figured out if I eat this, what am I going to have to trade off tomorrow or for the next week that I can't eat? So and it was such like this freedom to not be chained to food.
Yeah, that's very recognizable. I'm sorry you had that experience as well.
Hey, it's part of my life and my process. And if I don't
Mm-hmm.
have some of these experiences and I don't know the difference, then I am not equipped then to help myself or to share and help the person next to me. Right. And that's why we're having this conversation today, because we're hoping that by sharing our experiences and what we've learned, that we can help the person next to us. So Stephanie, how did you get to a point of awareness and shifting your perspective and your because the food is an emotional thing. It is a totally emotional thing. It is one of those things where we assign emotions to food and the comfort of it or the absence of it giving us control or not. How did you kind of get to where you are with your food process and journey?
Um, I think so. It was mainly so I had therapy for about a year, group therapy, and we just had to eat according to the schedule. And at the end of therapy, they advised us to at least stick to the schedule for another year. And I think just by doing that, I think I finally got the nutrients that I got. And I think before that, like, I'm not sure if I completely agree that it's emotion, like that emotion and food are so closely, I guess they are in some way, but in another way, I think that food, like we learn all the time that we should not eat too much. So I think I'm quite convinced that most people are actually just eating slightly less than they should. And I think when you're eating slightly less than you should every day, then your body just gives these signals. You need to eat. I want food. Give me that food. Give me that very yummy caloric food. Um, and I think the emotions, or at least the negative emotions, are taught. I think we are taught that being fat and being someone who enjoys eating is a weakness, and that it's yeah that it's that it's not good. So I think because of all those messages, we tie emotions to food. But I think in itself, food is a happy thing. Um, at least for me now, I think over the years, now that I'm not having all these problematic thoughts and behaviors anymore, I can really enjoy food. And especially when I'm eating together with people, and when the food is really good, I can just really enjoy it.
Oh, that is so nice. That is a nice place to be, Stephanie. It really is. It really is. It's such a nice sense of freedom that you get to just be able to enjoy. And I think that is a really good point to make. It's that food in itself is not a positive or a negative. It is a good thing because it nourishes us. But I think that those negative emotions do get tied to it over time in our experiences and what the world around us is saying and imposing about what they believe food to be and how it affects. I think that's such a good point. Thank you for that. So on this journey of yours, what have you noticed about food in the sense of how you see it today versus how you used to view food? How has that changed?
I'm not entirely sure if I understand the
Understand.
question.
I'll be more clear. I didn't think it was. I'm sorry. My apologies because it wasn't.
No, no worries.
So if you had to go back to your 12 or 15-year-old self, how did you think about food? Like, was it nourishing and you had to make sure you had the right kinds of food in your life, and food was a happy thing or a good thing in your mind, versus how do you see food now that you have come to another side of this experience with food? How is it that you view food now and feel about it and think about it? What are the two? How is the contrast?
Okay, yeah, I think I get it now. So it changed completely. The contrast is huge. I think as a 12-year-old, on the one hand, I really love food because food is extremely delicious, or at least some food is. And at the same time, I felt very ashamed about eating, and I felt guilty about eating, and I felt bad, and I felt like a failure. So, and especially when the food was nice and caloric, I felt very happy about just the innate feeling, I guess, from eating nice food. And at the same time, I would have all these negative emotions. I was basically telling myself that that I wasn't doing a good thing when I was eating. Whereas now, I think, um, a lot of food is just neutral to me now. And the delicious food is just great. I can just really enjoy it. And I mean, okay, I should be honest, at times I can still have some periods of time in which I can still struggle a bit, and I can still feel like it's a bad thing or that I shouldn't eat too much. But I think, like, compared to what it was like as a teenager, it's nothing. And on top of that, there are also periods of time where it really is nothing, and it's really neutral. Like I said, I can forget about food now. That's because it's neutral now. Yeah.
Oh, I can relate to that because I forget to eat all the time because I would never have done that before. Like I was constantly thinking about what I was going to eat next. And, then balancing and weighing out, trading off, you know, something that was maybe not the healthiest choice, but it was really yummy and I wanted to eat it. But I knew and I would feel guilty and shameful about eating it if I didn't deny myself something else to sort of, in my mind, balance it out, which now I know is so not healthy and really not a good way to think about food. Um, and there's so many things now that I won't eat them. I just don't eat them. And for me, it was a really big process to go through. Um, Number one, my dad is a celiac, so I I had not approached that in my life as maybe being something that was causing me trouble with my food relationship. Um, and that was the first place I started is I removed the gluten from my diet. And I didn't and by diet I mean what I eat on the regular, not as in a deprivation type diet. And this is a way of life, not a short fad type thing. But what I learned when I did that was that my body was constantly in this cycle of inflammation and I was hurting all the time. And I didn't realize how bad I hurt till I stopped hurting because I had this chronic inflammation from eating gluten that wasn't agreeing with my body. And then as I also went longer over time, because now I'm on 3 years of having done this, I'm also got to a point where I wasn't craving all the time. Like I stopped thinking about what I was going to eat next 24/7. I mean, I was like, this is the first time I realized it. I was like, this is crazy. I've never in my whole life not been thinking about food. And I didn't realize that for me, and this is not the case for everybody, but for me, that it was what happens in an allergy trigger is that what you are allergic to or what doesn't agree with your body, you crave, which seems so counterintuitive because you would think your body would be like, no, this is bad. You don't want this. And you would have no desire for it. But when in actuality, and it happens on so many instances when it comes to food allergens in particular, that you crave it when you're allergic to it. And it was this insane cycle. And when I was able to break that cycle, it really helped me start to move through and regain some healthier perspectives and approach to food in the rest of my life, which was a whole new thing for me. To be able to be neutral about food and to not have to think about food all the time. So Stephanie, what is your favorite food? Like if you had to say, this is my favorite food and if I die in the next 24 hours, this is what I want to eat, what would you choose?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I really vary in what I like. Like I can really, really love cookies and all kinds of cakes, but I can also really enjoy savory food. So I don't really have a good answer, I'm afraid.
Oh, that's okay. You can pick a savory, you can pick a sweet. It's not one thing.
Yeah, yeah, sorry.
It's okay. It's like I always said, like if I know that I'm gonna die tomorrow, I want a dozen. There's this bakery, a local bakery where I grew up. It's called Pullman's Bakery. And they make these sugar cookies with this like crunchy glaze on top of them. And they ice them beautifully. I mean, they do them for all the different holidays. That has always been my favorite. Well, they're not gluten-free. They're not refined white sugar-free, right? So if I'm dying, I want a dozen. I want a dozen Pullman cookies.
That's nice. I did think of something. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go. What is it?
I think mango. I really, really love mangoes.
Oh, now how do you like yours? You like them just sliced? Do you like yours with a little salt on it? Which I found that really weird when I found people that salt fruit, but apparently it brings the flavor out.
Oh, I only knew about that with pineapple. I never tried it with mango, so I only know it's sliced. I've learned something new.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And mango's so good. That's a good one. I like that. So, Stephanie, what has been the best part that you've learned about yourself on your journey with food?
That's a good question. What I've learned about myself. I do a lot of echolalia. I think as I look back, I think I'm still quite shocked that during my teenage years, I would also like enforce the negative feelings. Whenever I was eating something, I would kind of actively tell myself, this is a bad thing, you're gross, you shouldn't do this, this is disgusting. So it wasn't just the environment and it wasn't just my mom, but it was also myself kind of punishing myself all the time. And I don't really know why I did that. Although I do think that in part, my eating disorder in general, it gave me a purpose, talking about autism and purpose. It gave me a focus in my life. And I think punishing myself was maybe a way of, a very strange skill to achieve what I wanted to achieve. But I think it's really sad that I thought that was even an option. And I think I've learned that I don't have to punish myself to achieve what I want. And if I cannot achieve what I want without punishing myself, then maybe I just shouldn't achieve it.
I think that's such a beautiful insight, and thank you for sharing that. Because I think that you're not alone, for starters. I think that is something that so many of us do. We have this internal monologue where, I talk about the bad connection relationship. And sometimes it's not the physical living being person that is still in your life. Sometimes it's a bad connection from a relationship that was in your life before. And sometimes that relationship is the one we have with ourselves. Sometimes we have that bad connection relationship where we're the ones that internally we're monologuing these really negative and pretty mean things to ourselves. I know that I did that as well. And I would say, you're fat and you don't need to eat this. And why did you eat that, Carole Jean? You're just cramming it in your face and you don't really need it. And you probably could go for 2 weeks and not eat and not hurt yourself one bit. And just those kind of really unhealthy things. And I know for me personally, not knowing I was autistic and not realizing it, but in retrospect now looking back, I felt so out of control. The world made no sense to me. I made no sense to myself in the world. Like I didn't feel like I ever fit or understood people or just life in general. And one of the ways in my 20s that I learned where I could gain some control was by not eating. I could deprive myself and I could not do something. And then, of course, I got very thin and people all then respond to you like, oh, you look so great and all this kind of stuff. So it was just reinforcing this horrible thing that was going on in my head that, you can't allow yourself to eat this because then no one's going to compliment you. You will go unseen. You will be unnoticed again. And it's such a vicious cycle that happens. But there's this freedom that happens when you get to this place of being able to say, you know what? I'm regaining the control of my life through the knowledge and awareness that now I know I'm autistic. Now I know that I experience the world differently. And I'm going to stop being so mean to myself. And it's not an overnight process. It isn't like you flip the switch and all of a sudden it happens. And it's a slow process. And it's one that I've been going on almost 8 years now. And in that, I have also experienced that just getting to understand who I am, just me, and that I'm not broken, that I do have choice and control in my life that doesn't have to only be attributed to what I eat and don't eat, or deprive myself of, or overindulge, because I also went through a period of overindulgence of things, into just being able to sort of be at this neutral place of, well, does it nourish my body? Does it fuel me to do the things that I love? And that's how I look at food now. I make decisions based on, is this something that is going to nourish my body so that I can do the things that I love to do? Because it is about a greater purpose. And I love that you pointed out that that's sort of where your mom started. This whole journey was autistics finding purpose. And I think that's so true. It's a really important part of our unveiling and taking away all of the things that we thought we were supposed to do, the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and actually crafting and identifying and uncovering what it is that we deem to be the purpose in our lives moving forward. Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. I really appreciate it. So if you had a few things or one thing to share with someone who is starting their journey of awareness and shifting how they feel and think about food, what would you say to them?
How they think about food. I would probably say a lot of things. I'm really convinced that a lot of people are just restricting themselves too much, which will lead to eating, like having these binge eating events. And I think especially when you only allow yourself, let's say, 1,000 calories a day, then if you binge eat 1,500, then that's an insane amount compared to what you're allowed to eat. Whereas if you just eat the 2,000 or 2,500 calories that you need, first of all, your binge eating events will be smaller, and especially relative to the amount that you like your normal intake, it doesn't feel so overwhelming how much it is. So I really I'm always telling people to try to critically evaluate if you are really eating enough, and otherwise maybe go see a dietitian or some healthcare professional who knows a lot about food, and set up an eating schedule. And I think for me, an eating schedule is also very nice. I think, especially being autistic, it's very clear, and I like clarity. So yeah, if people aren't too afraid to restrict themselves by having an eating schedule, and by the way, this eating schedule, it's not like it has to be the same food every day. It's quite general, so I can replace certain things with other things. I have a general idea of how much I can eat, but the times are quite set. Yeah, I guess that. And there's one thing that I would definitely tell everyone is that I think a lot of people are not aware of how fat phobic our society is. So we just are ingrained with these ideas that eating and fatness is something bad. And I think even to the point that a normal body is often already seen as a fat body. And when I say normal, I mean average. It's normal to have deviations. So fat and skinny bodies are normal as well. But yeah, so I think it's really good to be aware of those messages and try to be critical and form your own opinion about what's healthy and what's good. And I think that if you eat a healthy amount of food, you will have the body type that belongs to you, and that can be skinny, that can be fat, that can be something in the middle. But I think it's good to embrace that body type and love yourself that way, because that's who you are and what you've got. And I think if you're going to try to change that body type, it's a form of self-harm, I would say. And I would advise against that.
Stephanie, one of the things I'm curious about, because I think that somebody listening may have the same question, and it's, so for you, how did you know when you were eating enough? Because I think that's, I have alexithymia, and I have a really hard time sometimes identifying in the moment, like when I'm hungry. I had to learn how to identify what hunger was like in my body, how it expressed itself, what thirst felt like. Because honestly, until the last few years, I didn't really know what hunger felt like for me. And I didn't know necessarily thirst was easier, but to be hungry or to be satisfied, to be satiated, I had a much harder time identifying that because I have alexithymia, and it can sometimes be difficult to identify what that is. So how have you found that you identified when you were actually eating enough and not eating too little?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think for me, having had a disordered eating pattern for like almost 15 years, it was completely gone. How, like, my internal system, I don't think it was working very well anymore. So in therapy, they just said, they told me what I had to eat and what I was allowed to eat and what I should eat. And I just stuck to that for a very long time. And then I kept having these binge eating events. So at some point they said, I think you should eat more. And they just increased my 4 o'clock snack. And I think from that point onwards, I stopped having these binge eating events. And I think now, over time, because I'm almost 30 now, and I think I was 23 when I had my therapy. So it's been 7 years now. And I think now I can slowly identify when I'm hungry. And it's kind of this feeling in my stomach. It's hard to describe what it is. um, um, and sometimes I also don't notice it. And sometimes I still go wrong. Like a while ago, I was sticking to my eating schedule and even eating a bit more because I guess I was hungry, but I didn't really realize. But then somehow I still lost some weight. So it's tricky to really know when you're really hungry and when you're completely full. But yeah, for me, having this eating schedule has really helped, and just to kind of stick to the schedule. And if you over time see that you keep having binge eating events, or you keep having, I don't know what other effects you could have. Maybe when you eat too much, you maybe, I don't know how that would feel. But yeah, I would advise to have, like, if you are in doubt, I would advise to go to a healthcare professional and just ask, what is the amount of food I need to eat? Because, yeah, I don't know. I don't have any better advice. I'm sorry.
No, I think what you've shared is really good. For me, what I did and where I started that had made the biggest difference, because, you know, I would try and keep everything in my head, and I found that that wasn't the very best way. And I knew better. As a scientific person, I know better. So I said, okay, I'm going to just flip this around, and I am now going to be in my own experiment. And I started a food diary. And I started a food diary where I was. And I said, okay, I'm not going to make any changes. I'm not going to do anything different. I'm just going to start writing down and journaling, having a specific food diary for how I eat now. So I understand better what's going on with me now, where I'm starting. And so I started there, and I said, okay, for the next 2 weeks, 30 days, I'm not going to do anything, change anything, or do anything different. I'm just going to be aware of what I'm doing now. And I started writing down when I ate, what I ate, how much I ate, and I just journaled that, so that I had sort of this base of knowledge when I got to the end of the month that showed a picture of what my eating and drinking and my consumption of all things within my body were. And that really helped me, because then I could identify. Also, I started to journal in that process how I was feeling, what my body was experiencing, and just becoming more aware of that, to say, hey, did my stomach hurt? Did I feel dizzy? Was I like the Snickers commercial and I turned into like this grouchy monster or major diva? Because yes, I would do that. I would I would have I would wait too late to eat, and then I would eat more than I really needed, and then my stomach would hurt. And I can go back and look at the journal, at my food diary, and see those things. So then the best thing that for me was I could take one thing at a time, and I would make one change. And then I would journal that change over a period of time. Because for me, changing too many things meant I didn't know what was working and what wasn't working. And I could not attribute a specific causation if I didn't have an isolated variable. So one thing at a time, taking it slowly. So if you're adding something to or subtracting something, do it over a long enough period of time that your body has time to adjust. Because the University College London did a study on our habits and how we change from automaticity of one thing into a new automated behavior and a new thing. Because we have neural pathways that we can create that when they're old, they are like super highways because we do them all the time and they're automated. And then we're trying to make changes to do, things that are good for us. And those are hard because they're like the wide open field of grass that you may have walked through one time. And that's sort of that very narrow neural pathway. But the more you take that path, the more you do that same thing, the neural pathway is going to get wider and it's going to become an automated behavior. But it doesn't happen for a minimum of 66 days. So if you take one thing at a time and you slowly implement it, it's much easier to get through that messy, hard energy consumption part of the beginning and the middle to get to that point of an automated behavior where you're not having to put so much energy into it. Your brain is conserving energy by making it automated. So anything that you do in your life, food or otherwise, take it one thing at a time. Do it so that you can implement it and maintain it, and allow yourself the time to become an automated habit. You can't do something in 30 days and all of a sudden it's going to stick. It doesn't work that way. You're definitely closer. You're a third of a way there if you could do it for 33 days. So you just keep, or halfway there, 33 days, 66 days is the minimum. But just food journaling and just being aware of one thing at a time, know where you are, where you start, and then have an idea of also what your why is. What is your outcome? If you don't have a reason why you're doing something and you don't have an expected or anticipated outcome for why you're putting all this energy and effort into something, then you have no push behind you. You have no motivation for why you're doing it. So that's the other part, is to really think about your why. What is the outcome that you're expecting or anticipating? And what is it that you hope to achieve when you get there? Know that going into it as well. That's my tip.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I'm very impressed that you can do that. I've tried doing a lot of journals, and I always, at some point, I get lost and I stop. So I'm very impressed that you're able to do these kind of things for more than 2 weeks. I think 33 days is already like, I'm not sure if I can do that with anything.
And that's the great part too, is, it doesn't have to be written. I actually found an app on my phone and I did my food diary in the phone. So, whatever works. And I think everybody has to sort of adapt it to what they do best. So this conversation has really kind of hopefully helped somebody that's going through this or is approaching food in a way that, okay, I have sensory challenges. There are textures, there are smells, there are tastes that I do not like or that I love. And knowing that you don't have to, just throwing that out there, people, you don't have to do anything in any particular way, but what works, the way that works for you. And taking this opportunity to explore what does work for you and to take back the choosing and the crafting of what is serving you to enrich and nourish your life and your body so that you are moving forward in the life that you are now crafting and intentionally making those choices as a late identified autistic. This is the beautiful part of our butterfly journey that I call our unveiling, that you start one place that you didn't know, and now you do. And now you get to choose. Now you get to make those decisions for yourself. And it isn't about how anyone else does it. It's about how you do it. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for sharing your experiences and journey with us. Is there anything you'd like to share or say before we go?
I was thinking, it's not really related to food, although it can be related to food. But I'm currently still recovering from burnout. And I think a lot of people in the Mind Your Autistic Brain Society are in burnout or are dealing with burnout or are going to deal with burnout again. And I had this realization today that I would like to share, that I've been really harsh again towards myself about not being able to recognize my needs and my boundaries, because I kind of felt like if I would have stated my needs and boundaries better, then I wouldn't have gotten into this burnout. But then I realized that I think as an autistic person, and I think this is especially true for women, we are taught to ignore our needs and boundaries, because when we stick up for them, we are usually socially punished in some way. So it's quite hard to, it's quite harsh, I mean, to be so demanding of yourself. And I think the same thing may apply to food. But yeah, I would like to share that. Sorry, it's a bit off topic, but
it is not off topic. It is perfect. And yes, it absolutely is. And as the former burnout cycle queen over here, I can absolutely relate to what you just said. And thank you for sharing that, Stephanie. And thank you for being here and being willing to share something that I know is not often talked about, and that can also feel very uncomfortable because it is very personal. It is a very deep and personal journey that we take with our food and just with the way that we think and feel about ourselves. And I want to thank you and commend you on being very courageous and sharing today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. It's been also really great to share my story, as I don't feel like there's a lot of autistic stories being shared. So I really love the opportunity. Thanks.
Well, you have been a beautiful addition to the Mind Your Autistic Brain community, and your voice that you have contributed today is helping someone else. Thank you so much. And for anyone who would like to get in touch with Stephanie or ask her any questions, she is an active member of the Mind Your Autistic Brain community on Facebook, and she said she is happy for you to reach out and talk to her there. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for having this conversation. And if you are starting your journey today, we are here for you. We have resources. If you are looking for Burnout Balance, that is the free installment course for the unveiling method, and you can access that on the LinkedIn profile and also on the Instagram profile. So be sure you get that. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.